Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll start the presentation in about 1 minute. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much once again for joining us. We'll start the presentation in about 30 seconds. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Safety and Health Magazine webcast, Innovative Approaches to Hands-On Fire Extinguisher Training, Unveiling the Digital Advantage, sponsored by Lion. This is Alan Ferguson, Associate Editor at Safety and Health Magazine. Thank you so much for joining us, and before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items. As a disclaimer, the views of today's speakers and organization are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the National Safety Council or Safety and Health Magazine. Any mention of a commercial enterprise, product, or publication does not mean the council of the magazine endorses those items. After today's presentation, we'll conduct a question and answer session with our speakers. If you have a question, click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, type your question, and press the send button. We welcome your questions at any time during today's event. You don't have to wait for the Q&A to begin. We might not get to every question, but the good news is unanswered questions will be forwarded to today's sponsor. Also, after this presentation, you'll be asked to complete a brief evaluation survey, and I'll tell you more about that a little bit later. Also, just to let you know, this webcast will be archived so you can access it after today's live event. To view this webcast and all of our past webcasts, please visit safetyandhealthmagazine.com/events. You may also receive a link in our post-event email. With that, let's introduce our presenters. With us today are Matthew Gardner, Director of Marketing at Lion, David Sardinsky, Sales Director at Lion, and David Dukowitz, Category Sales Manager at Lion. Again, we thank you all for tuning in to this presentation. Now we're going to hand it off to Matthew Gardner, who's going to guide our audience through today's discussion.
Thanks, Alan. Let me just start off by saying we're so excited about the opportunity to speak to this group in particular. The people that I have with me today from the Lion team are all extremely passionate about safety, as I know is this community. And we wanted to just start out by saying that what we want to present today is about growth. It's about technology. And we're going to talk about, yes, some Lion products, but on the whole, there are things that are happening with regards to fire extinguisher safety in the country that absolutely make training better. And we are advocates for anything that makes training better. As we spoke about earlier, with me today are David Sardinsky and David Dukowitz. So that we don't confuse things too much, I'll let you know a Lion secret. David Dukowitz, we lovingly refer to as the Duke. And so that we can make differences between the two today, I will just refer to you, Dave, as the Duke. So let's get right into it. We want to start out this conversation with a couple of, just with a list of kind of what we're going to cover today. So we're going to start out by discussing what the national standards are for training, which I'm sure most of you know, or at least think we know. We're going to talk about traditional fire extinguisher training. We're going to talk about the pain points of fire extinguisher training. We're going to talk about effectiveness when it comes to the numbers behind fire extinguisher training. We're going to talk about the technology that we know about and discuss other things that are in the marketplace. At the end of the day, though, the entire point is we want to share what we know and also have you share with us what you know about what makes training better. And so Dave Sardinsky, let's kind of kick off the conversation here. What, most all of us know about the national standards are OSHA, right? And you day in and day out are dealing with people that are looking to fit into or qualify this standard, especially when you're working with our customers. For me, there's some key points in this, right? There's what's important about OSHA that we all need to understand. So break it down for us. What is it that you hear that people want when it comes to fire extinguisher training in OSHA?
Well, as everyone I'm sure is familiar on this call, what the standards are as far as having a training for any new employees where fire extinguishers are hanging in the workplace or have a an expectation of an employee to use a fire extinguisher in an emergency for new hires and on an annual basis. Everyone's familiar with that that's on this call today. It's not any news to anybody. What we hear from with our clients and customers on a daily basis is they generally want to do more, something in addition to that. Make sure that not just telling someone what to do in an emergency situation, are their employees going to be able to react in an effective and efficient manner that can help protect them as well as others and property as well. So that's the main thing that we hear frequently from our clients every day is, they want to make sure that their employees, their people are prepared. God forbid they face an emergency situation that everyone hopes doesn't happen.
But, and I think Duke, you probably have some good perspective on this. It's not just about OSHA, is it?
No, and to Dave's point, this is really about exceeding the standards and some of the expectations. This is about trying to provide appropriate training for our colleagues, for our for the folks that we work with and we see on an everyday basis. So there's a lot of there can be a lot of passion that comes through with fire safety training. So yes, of course, this exceeds just OSHA, and then flipping it over onto the fire service side of the business too, because I in my world I kind of straddle both areas. There's some standards and there's some reasonable expectations that exist out there as well.
And I think that many of you on the call today may not know this, but Lion didn't start out as a training products company for business and industry. Lion, for the past 125 years, has been making equipment for the fire service, for firefighters, bunker gear, turnout gear, helmets, boots, and gloves. And it's been in the last 15 years that we have really been getting into the training space. And that came with what many of you know as the Bull-X system, which was purchased by Lion and is now a very important part of our business. But, one of the standards that I find that people may not know about, and I would be curious, in fact, we should go ahead and launch, we do have a poll question here set up. How many of you knew that the NFPA had a regulation or recommendations around fire service training or fire extinguisher training in the workplace? So if you don't mind, take a second and try and answer that question. We'll look at the results. And Dave, there's not a ton of differences between the NFPA 10 standard and the OSHA standard, with one, I think, really important difference. There at the bottom, it says qualified instructors with fire safety knowledge should conduct the training. And I think that that's a little bit different in a lot of the business and industry space, is because we don't always have a qualified instructor, and you can't always get the fire department to come. That's a little bit different than the OSHA regulations, isn't it?
It's still very vague. Where what it doesn't say is what constitutes a qualified instructor. If you have knowledge of how to use a fire extinguisher, what the classes of fire are, what incipient stage fire is, proper pass technique, that could technically count as qualification. But there's no set standard from NFPA of what, it doesn't need to be a fire department, a professional firefighter, or professional fire service instructor to do this. These are guidelines that for the most part, domestically fire departments try to meet, and it's something that's not it's not a regulation, it's a standard, but it also doesn't get into specifics about what constitutes a qualified instructor as well.
I don't know. Can you guys see the result of our poll there? There we go. So I think most of us felt like we were highly aware or somewhat aware, but there was a good number of people out there that weren't aware or were somewhat unaware even of the NFPA. So all of that is great, but I think that we would all also agree that yes, there's a standard, but the training that really is needed to be effective is so much more than just what's in those regulations. And so Dave S., talk to me about what you're hearing people say they need with regards to effective training.
Right, and this goes back to what I was, alluded to when you first asked me about this around the OSHA standards. Is, what we hear every day from talking to folks in a wide range of different backgrounds is want to make sure that whatever they're doing, it's resonating with their employees, with their audience. So we're not just talking about what to do in an emergency situation. In this case, it's, you know, how to react, how to build that memory, how to keep their trainees engaged, and what's the best way about going to do that. Is it through interactive videos? Is it through hands-on training? Is it through things in a virtual environment? So it's a little bit different based on customers, cases and needs for things and what resonates. And that's one of the main things that, varies across the board. But the overarching thing that most folks are talking or that we're speaking with are looking for is to make sure that whatever they're doing is impactful and that it's going to stick with their audience. They're not going to walk out of whatever training session they have and just forget it, because these are skills and things that you need to have to be able to react in a very chaotic emergency situation. That we want to make sure that they're not wondering what am I supposed to do when faced with an incipient stage fire or something potentially even beyond that, what to do to be safe and to keep others safe as well too.
And with all of that, I think comes some acknowledgement about the way that fire extinguisher training is done typically today, and maybe what some of the drawbacks are. That, I mean, Dave, what do you see when you're in the field and you're talking with people? How are they conducting training today?
Yeah, there's a lot of different styles and there's a lot of different ways, especially, I had, noticed, I was just kind of peeking through at some of the questions that are out there. There was someone was making a comment and alluding to hands-on training and kind of putting it towards when your child is doing driver's ed or driver's training, is passing the written test. Does that constitute and create a good driver? And I think that's a great analogy. So I'm sorry, I didn't see who it was that wrote that. Thank you. I think that's a great analogy. But in line with that too, hands-on training, trying to produce the right approach. You can do hands-on training, but reinforce bad or not the habits that you want to reinforce in that. Now, having said that, Matt, to answer your question a little more directly, there's a lot of different styles that I see out there in the field. And, there's classroom discussions that we see, there's PowerPoint conversations. I've been in situations where I've heard the conversation had or said to a new hire, if you believe you need to be utilizing a fire extinguisher, you should be leaving the environment. You should not be trying to stop that. And I'm not going to say one way or the other on that, because there's a lot of different thoughts there. But I'm looking at that too and thinking to myself, and put this out to the group too, is that reinforcing all of the right behaviors? Because yes, obviously you may want to be removing yourself from the situation that you cannot handle, but where are the additional steps of, did you notify? Sure, you may be exiting, but did you pull a fire alarm on the way out? Are you notifying those around you? Other ways that I've seen and have experienced, there are folks that will do burn pans and will utilize actual dry chem extinguishers. They're probably expired. I'm sure there's a number of folks on the call that have done this at times as well. Their students are getting that feel of the kick and the discharge and the idea. And there's a lot of aspects to that. That's great, right? Because that is something that someone needs to be ready to experience if they intend to be discharging an extinguisher. Especially if they're lighting kerosene or gas, there's heat that's involved with that. And yes, of course, feeling the heat is an aspect of it, right? So there's an awareness piece to that as well. And there's a lot of great ways and a lot of great things that you can utilize being able to do that. I've even noticed that some folks, while they will be discharging an extinguisher, they may put road cones or sports cones on the ground, because it's one thing to discharge the extinguisher. It's one thing to feel the kick and understand it and notice what's going on from that. It's another thing to get that proper pass technique down, the pull, aim, squeeze, sweep technique of extinguishing a fire. So there's a lot of different ways or styles of training that has happened out there in the field.
I want to thank Bob Hafner for kind of bringing up the concept or the analogy of, you know, teaching your kid to drive and the instructors. And I really feel like it's important to mention that anytime we can clarify or qualify people that can help us, whether we do it on our own or teach somebody else, it's yes, we can do the training. It's another thing to follow the standards of the regulations. I want to move on, Dave, and you both of you have already kind of touched on this, but the drawbacks between the traditional styles of training versus what hands-on training or having a qualified instructor might bring. Let's just jump on that for a second. And yeah, go ahead, Duke.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of drawbacks that happen there. One of the examples, especially on the photo here, one of the items that I've talked to a lot is having that discharge of the actual dry chem. You have to do that outside, obviously, right? Well, you don't have to, but then you're stuck in a situation where you have to have the appropriate cleanup to be able to do it. You're weather dependent at that situation as well. What if there's a night shift? You got multiple different shifts that you're going to have to be, trying to work with. Are you able to, meet that demand of being able to train all of your employees? Not only train them, but also effectively train them so that they can master that muscle memory you're looking for. Dave, do you have some input on that maybe as well?
Yeah, and a lot of it has to do as far as building the muscle memory, how to have that repeatability. The common thing that we hear from folks that have conducted training in this way, where they have been done some limited hands-on training, if they're using expired extinguishers, there's a finite number of them. There's a finite number of folks that are able to train with them. If maybe someone gets it wrong the first time and they need to try again, that's not always a possibility. So that's something that, overshadows the repeatability and the effectiveness to make sure that you're reinforcing the proper behavior, because that's not always possible in the traditional way that's pictured here, versus being able to have that repeatability, do it as many times as you need. With each trainee, everyone works at different skill sets, but that's something that's a common pain point that we hear from folks quite frequently.
I also want to acknowledge there's some really neat questions and comments coming across for the chat here regarding fire brigade training, that where OSHA does define the type of who's qualified to do that. And that is a big conversation that we might not get into right now, but Dave Sardinsky, you have customers from all over the world, and especially in the nation, that have their own fire brigades, that they're going way beyond just fire extinguisher training. And Lion is all about the tools necessary to do the job. And I think that if anybody, I want to put this out there, if there's somebody out there that's looking for a specific solution, we don't talk about it today. I just want to urge you to get with us afterwards, because if you're in that situation, you've got a fire brigade, or it's a much more rigorous situation than just watching a video, there are some great tools out there to assist with that. Moving on here, we've talked about the drawbacks. Let's get into some of the statistics, and we're going to keep this moving because I really want to get to the technology and the solutions, but I think it's important to acknowledge where we're at here. So Duke, this is really your forte. Take it away.
Yeah. And there's some aspects of this that can be a little difficult to talk about. And, it's not always something that I like to talk about, but the reality is we have to have an awareness of this. And this is something that we take in consideration when we put our product together and we put our offering together. We try to think of this again as an awareness piece. So, we pay attention not only on the maybe the business and industry side with fire extinguisher training. There's also an aspect that we watch for the firefighter training side, because we straddle both of those markets. But there's a lot of estimates out there, especially when it comes to non-residential building fires and losses. And, unfortunately, the nation suffers losses in a lot of different measurable ways, which we have up there. I'm not going to walk through what those measurable ways are, but they exist. And that's something that we have to try to be aware of. And, you know, unfortunately, we're seeing some trends that are happening. There's some increase in the non-residential cooking fires, right? You know, especially now, maybe we're getting back to the office a little more than we have been the last couple of years. You know, but also there's also an increase in the intentionally set fires as well. And there's, you know, when you say non-residential, there's a lot of places that could exist. That can exist in the medical world, in the healthcare industry. That can exist in schools and institutions as well. You know, but unfortunately, we're also seeing that rise in unintentional or careless, you know, set fires as well. Unfortunately, and you know, all in all, you know, these trends, unfortunately, we're just seeing an increase over the last 10 years in this. Fortunately, there's a decrease in injuries, which we're very, very happy to see, and we want to be a part of the decreases in all of this. We want to, you know, just like you and everyone that's taking the time, which by the way, thank you for doing this and what you do out there in the field. You know, this is what we're all trying to come together to figure out. So, you know, there's just some numbers out there for us and why that means and what it means to us with fire extinguisher training as well. We do have some other stats and some other items that we, you know, pay attention as we go along as well. You know, Matt, maybe we can, and you know, now's a good time to move on to the next slide, maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. And some of these national trends, you know, again, you know, I was talking about how we pay attention on the fire service side too. One thing I just want to mention that we've noticed, you know, there is an increase in the US population, which is wonderful. Unfortunately, there has been a continuing decrease in the firefighters that we have available to protect us and our communities in the world, which, you know, especially when it comes to incipient stage, you know, maybe that does put some more pressure on those of us that are not in the fire service to be able to find ways to provide fire safety for our community as well. And maybe that's education, and maybe that's all that we need to do. But one of the things that we've noticed that, and one of the trends that we think is really important to take note in this group here, and this comes from an industry group, individuals that have been trained in fire extinguisher training, according to this trade group, 250% more effective in extinguishing fires. So that's something that we look at, and we want to be a part of that change. And we know everyone on this call wants to do that as well. In the last slide, we were talking a lot about non-residential fires. Now, the residential fires that do happen, while they're the smaller percentage amount of types, they are equaling about just over half of all of the fire dollar loss within the United States. You know, and kind of flipping back to the non-residential side, that's increased. The amount of those fires have been increasing, you know, about 20% over the last 10 years. So this is something we have to really be aware of. And specifically, where are those fires starting? And this is all settings. This is whether it's residential or whether it's non-residential. You know, we're noticing there's some trends. It's kitchens, it's bathrooms, it's locker rooms, which, you know, may challenge what some of us thought. I mean, it challenged what I thought when I first saw these stats and what I believed was happening. And it just made us aware, especially with what we do with Lion, it made us aware that we need to be able to assist those in training, or those that want to be able to train in the environment where a fire is likely to occur. So there's a number of items here, because again, you know, looking at some of these other stats, you know, especially when you start going into the healthcare or maybe the institutional educational settings, there's a lot that's going on in that world as well that we have to be aware of in terms of national trends.
So Dave, I wanna bring up something here too. This kind of came up in the chat, and this is for everybody. You know, we become aware of the trends. We know what the data is, but ultimately at the end of the day, every company has to decide what is the right training for them. You know, one of the statements was about, you know, many workplaces don't require employees to train. Their strategy is completely different. Get out of the building. I have some thoughts there. I think we all probably have some thoughts there, is that even if you're just trying to get out of the building, that building may be on fire to a point where you can't get out, and that fire extinguisher is your only line of defense. That's something to take into consideration, but that still doesn't change that company's policy. So although we all may have different opinions, what I want to say is that at Lion, and I think as professionals, we want everyone to train their way, the way that is right for them. It's not about one particular way to do any of this. It's about what are the tools you can do to do it the way you need to do it. And I think that's kind of the perfect segue into a couple of solutions. Now, of course, we are Lion and we have our tools and we would love to discuss that technology, but I want to this is not a sales conversation. This is a awareness conversation. All tools, if they get the job done, are the right tool. And so we love the conversation and want to keep moving it in that direction and be holistic about what we're talking about today. I want to launch, we have a poll question here, and if we can go ahead and launch that. And it really has to do with, and let's see if we can get that question up here, and I'll just read through it. Engaging with technology as a group, and before we talk anymore, do we believe, or what are your thoughts and opinions on hands-on training and the use of technology such as simulators, VR systems? Can they significantly improve engagement and effectiveness of fire extinguisher training? Yes, no, or you're undecided? I'm just curious before we go into this to know what your thoughts are. So we'll give that a couple of seconds and then I'm going to move on, and we're just going to talk about 3 very distinct different levels of hands-on training and ways that you can train. And again, no one tool is right for the job. Can we go ahead and see the results? Okay, so overwhelmingly, we all think, or many of us think, that there's potential there, that hands-on training, additional training and technology have a place. Now let's watch these, and I think the next part of discussion after we watch these 3 little videos is going to be interesting to know your thoughts on how this would or wouldn't work for you, or what questions come from that. So we'll go ahead, and I apologize in advance. The volume was not super high on this video, so we'll be quiet and we'll just watch and listen.
Hey guys, I'm Dave Dukowitz with Lion, and I'm here to talk to you today about our Bullseye, our digital fire extinguisher training system. Now, the Bullseye is a training system that you can bring into any location in your facility where a fire is likely to occur. Now, what you're able to do with the Bullseye is you're able to control 3 different classes of fire, A, B, and C. And each class of fire has its own characteristics that are associated with it. So class A, you're going to hear that cracking, popping of wood or paper burning. Class B, you're going to hear that roaring boil of a flammable liquids fire. Class C, you're going to hear that arcing, sparking of an electrical fire. You also have the ability to control multiple different difficulty settings. So you can keep it up if you have someone that maybe has a little more experience with fire extinguisher training, or you're going to utilize one of our larger simulated extinguishers, such as a 10 or 20-pound extinguisher. You can also control the volume as well, depending upon where you are in your location. So ultimately, when you have the fire and you set the difficulty level in the class of fire, you take one of our digital extinguishers. Now, we take actual extinguishers, we modify them, we put our technology into them, we weigh them to feel like actual extinguishers, and we time them to last like actual extinguishers as well. So you pull the pin, you squeeze and sweep, but improper technique, that will not put out the fire. If we just spray around the top, that's all we're doing is pushing the fire around. If we only put out one side of the fire, it will rekindle itself. The instructor also has the ability to flare the fire up and flare the fire down as well. However, ultimately, the trainee only has one way to put out this fire, and that's with the proper pass technique. Successful put out. Now, the advantage with the Bullseye, like we said earlier, we can put this in any location where a fire may be likely to occur in your facility. So maybe in a kitchen of maybe an office or a school or a hospital. You can also put it on a shop floor or a manufacturing line if you're in a manufacturing facility. You'll also have the flexibility to bring this into maybe conference rooms, hallways, classrooms, any space where you're able to train indoors. You will be able to train effective extinguisher training with the Bullseye system. If you're looking to move past just the pass technique for training for your facility, you're able to add our SG-1000 into the training. So what this does, this produces 1,000 cubic feet of smoke to zero visibility in 1 minute. However, with the Bullseye system, you have the ability to control it at 10 different smoke levels. So you're able to create the perfect amount of smoke for every evolution. Also, our smoke liquid is a non-toxic water-based smoke liquid, so there will be no issues utilizing this within your facility. Thanks, and stay safe.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next one here, and kind of at the end, we'll talk a little bit about all of these.
So let's take a few minutes to talk about our race station. If you're looking to move past just the pass technique for fire extinguisher training, incorporating our race station will allow you to train in an area in your facility where a fire is likely to occur and get down the muscle memory for that scenario. What I mean by that is you can take our extinguisher box and you can put that where the extinguisher is in that location. Same with our pull station alarm, our nunciator prop, even our electric cutoff prop. Now we even incorporate an interactive 911 phone into this as well, so you can actually dial out to a pre-recorded message. Now, the way that this works is we would have discovery of the fire. The trainee would then pull the alarm, the annunciator is going to go off, they could pick up the phone, and they could dial 911. Again, that's a pre-recording that we've set in. However, if you're utilizing the customized scenarios feature, you can change what that phone number is that they're dialing. You can also change what that recording is as well. So then the trainee would go through the process of putting out the fire with the extinguisher, just like they would in any other training scenario. Successful put out.
All right, so let's go on and do one more different level, different concept of training here.
Hey guys, I'm Dave Dukowitz with Lion. I'm here to talk to you today about our Intelligent Training System, or ITS for short. The Intelligent Training System is a propane-driven fire extinguisher training system. Now you'll plug it in to a 12-volt plug like you'll find on your car. You'll also plug it into a standard propane tank like you find on your gas grill at home. That propane tank will give you 250 full evolutions. Now what's great about the Intelligent Training System is we simulate 3 classes of fire and we have 4 different difficulty settings that you're able to utilize with this system. When you run this system, you have the dead man switch to turn it on, and then you're going to have flame produced. Now what's different about our system is that it utilizes our smart extinguishers, which are water-enabled extinguishers. You're going to fill it up with either 4 or 6 liters of water, and then you'll top it off with compressed air, so you'll have the kick and the feel of an actual extinguisher, but you won't have the mess of a dry chem extinguisher because you're discharging water. Now what's really important about the Intelligent Training System are the 4 sensors that are on the front of the burn pan itself. That will pick up the sound frequency that the smart extinguishers emit as the trainee is applying the proper pass technique. And that's the only way for the trainee to extinguish this fire, is by the system reading the appropriate pass technique. Now again, the instructor has the dead man switch so they can control everything. They'll have flame. Once they press that button and hold it, trainee will come through with the smart extinguishers, proper pass technique, and that's how you'll be able to conduct effective extinguisher training at your facility. Once again, I'm Dave Dukowitz from Lion. We're talking about our Intelligent Training System, or ITS for short. Thank you, and stay safe.
Okay, so what we just saw were 3 totally different subsets of technology that can be used in varying different ways. You saw there was a live fire approach, still using technology to make the training cleaner, more repeatable. And Dave, I think that's one of the things that we hear is, how do I change my training from being 12 people watching, one person gets to use the extinguisher, to everybody gets a chance to train. If you want live fire training, that ITS, a great tool. You can go out and you can get that touch and the feel and the hands-on training, but everybody gets a turn and it's not a mess. But it's a whole different level when you're talking about training indoors or in the location where that fire is likely to occur. It's hard to go into the factory and spray water during the middle of the day, right? So to each their own, everybody has their own method. Break it down for me. Let's talk about hands-on and how we go about it. There's two good statistics here, and I want your opinion, Duke. 96% retention rate compared to 55% retention rate when hands-on training is applied, right? And then also from FEMA here, we're saying that you're 75% more effective when you've actually used a fire extinguisher in training as compared to people that just watch the videos. That's a huge difference. What are you hearing, Duke? What's the word on the street about hands-on training?
Yeah, hands-on training, that is the big push. It's the desire for in the experience that I have had, it is the desire for everyone to be able to utilize hands-on training. There's a lot of pieces that go to that, right? There's a big puzzle, which I think everyone on this call, understands and sees and experiences and has a lot of ways that they handle with that. But the biggest aspect to all of this is that people want to ensure they're reinforcing the appropriate steps that they need for their facility and for their employees as well. So that's really the big push here, is just to be effective, be able to have that clean, safe, yet repeatable approach, and be able to touch on all employees to be able to provide this hands-on training.
Dave Sardinsky, one of the questions that I get all the time, and I think you get asked, is how do I justify investment in technology? And I don't want to just say, Lions products. There's a lot of technology you can invest in. If there is a fire in your facility, it's a massive financial loss. And if somebody gets hurt or injured, it's an even more massive. How do people that you're working with break down the justifications for investing in systems that allow them to do actual hands-on training?
Great question. I mean, we don't like to think about what the financial impact of a loss or an incident might be. So most of the time when we're discussing these types of investments in training or enhancing someone's training program, we're looking at what we're investing in long-term, as far as the repeatability, the ability to train whenever and wherever they want, versus what they might be doing now. So there's generally a cost associated, even if you're doing a classroom training, or maybe you're bringing in an outside party. Even a lot of our customers that have the fire department come in, there's a donation or something, maybe they provide free service, but they only can come in at a certain time of year, where you're hiring people throughout the year. People are on vacation when they come in. So the ability to be able to have that flexibility, reduce downtime, it's all about what the priorities are based on your facility, your needs, what's important to you. If you're looking to go above and beyond the standard and create effective training to make sure that your employees are better prepared, what's the most efficient way to do that? So our live fire system is much more efficient than a traditional way of training, but maybe a lot of our customers don't want to bring everybody outside into the parking lot. The ability to train close to where you may encounter a fire in your day-to-day job is going to reduce your downtime. You're already in that area. You can do small groups more frequently. Really, the amount of people that you're looking to train, that's something that isn't a common consideration. So we see that quite often, where when you think about this traditionally, you're thinking about that 12 people watching one person put the fire out outside. It's never been a possibility in a lot of cases, or many folks aren't aware of it. Hey, now I could train all 500 people in my facility. How do I go about doing that? What would the cost be for that? And in most cases, it would be exponentially too high without having a way and a means of doing that yourself with something like what we've been talking about, different ways for technology to fill in those gaps, to be able to actually help reduce that cost in the long run. And that's a lot of what the conversations that we have on a daily basis with our the folks that we work with are looking towards.
one of the pieces of conversation that I heard over and over again, especially at the NSC trade show that we were at down in Louisiana, was people that have these systems were coming up and saying, you know, at first this was a difficult justification because we were only thinking about my location. But then we were like, hey, we can ship this stuff to our other locations and it can be shared. That, you know, they found their own solutions and the ways that they justified what they were doing. But at the end of the day, it was a massive improvement to what they were doing. They felt like they were meeting and exceeding the standard. And that ultimately for most of them was the goal. Um, Kind of what we're looking at here, just as a synopsis, is we're looking to engage people. We're looking to have effective hands-on training. Repeatable training, I think, is the key here. You want to be able to do this, especially if you're a company that has high turnover or you have employees, factory workers that are new ones every single week. These type of systems can be set up in a place where it's ready and there to be used on a daily basis, and you make sure you have good training, not just sit down and watch this video, which in a lot of ways doesn't do the job, doesn't cut the mustard. Um, you know, and there's different levels of reality. For some people, Dave Dukowitz, I feel like you and I have talked about this a lot, and I'd love to hear your thoughts here again. For some people, adding smoke and being in the right location is the level of reality. For some people, having live fire is the right level of reality. Does it matter? Is there one that's more effective?
Ooh, yeah, that's a great question. Geez, I'd like to call it the $1,000,000 question. But a lot of this is going back to what we've been talking about the whole time. It's fire extinguisher training, your way. That's what is really important here. I had noticed on the chat someone had mentioned that the bullseye is a great item or a great training tool for someone that has never utilized an extinguisher before. And you know what? We believe that as well. We think we wholeheartedly believe in an escalating approach to training, and we think everything has a place in that escalation as you go up. So maybe you do have someone that has never experienced or never utilized an extinguisher before. And before you step them into live fire training, you may want to take the digital approach and get that muscle memory down before you go into maybe something that might be considered a little higher level, which is with the live fire aspect. However, the inverse of that, I've also seen the bullseye being utilized with the race station in specific locations of a facility, right? Where now the employee is being tested to see if they know where the nearest pull station is, if they know where the nearest fire extinguisher is. I've been in situations. I was with a customer who had purchased our system and purchased the multiple different types of extinguishers that we have available. They laid them out in front of the bullseye itself, and they had their employees turn the corner and discover a fire. They didn't even know training was happening. And they had to make decisions based on what they saw, what they heard, where they were, what extinguishers they should be utilizing, and how they should be approaching it. Now, that's a very high level type of training, and this was a more high level approach that this person was trying to achieve. But again, that was in a digital environment, so there's a lot of different ways that you can expand this, right, and take that escalating approach to training, with how you may need to be able to utilize that for your facility.
You're spot on. And I think I love seeing comments like this because it stokes conversation, stokes thought. One, I just put something up there as in a response that there's another tool we haven't even talked about. It's up there on the page, virtual reality. There's some neat tools on the marketplace today for virtual reality. And I'll tease this a little bit. Lion is working on a virtuality that you'll hopefully see very soon. Where does that fit in? And I think we have a poll question. I want to know the group's thoughts on this. If we can put that poll up. And I want you to please answer this question. Let's just do it on the concept of, well, let's answer this. I believe there's a third poll that is about virtual reality and emerging technologies. Is that available? I may have missed that. If not, I would love for you to sound off on your opinions here as we can. What are your thoughts on virtual reality? Does it work for you, and why? Why not? We have seen some very interesting voice the customer data on this. And I'll just bring it out. One of the largest challenges is that it's great for younger generations, but not so much for Grandma June who sits at the front desk. And so I'd be curious, do you think that virtual reality is a valuable tool for your organization? How do you see it fitting in? So, I mean, feel free to put that in the chat or in the Q&A. And if we have time, we can, look at that a little bit more, but it is a really neat tool, but can it be harnessed correctly? So let's jump into, and this is a quote that I have found in many of the jobs that I've been when I was in the military or otherwise, these quotes keep coming back to me. It goes back to train your way. Using tools that enable your organization to train in a way that's meaningful and specific to the emergencies you will most likely encounter. And George S. Patton said, the more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in battle. That's in a nutshell why we want to put people through the motions of hands-on training, right? Another maybe similar approach is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so let's move forward here and talk about a couple of use cases. And I'm hoping there's some good questions that come out of this. Dave, why don't you take us away? You're the one that's really in the trenches with regards to the industrial organizations that use these tools.
Just to touch on, and again, some of this is going to sound like I'm repeating myself because I am, but a lot of these use cases and pain points that we hear from these particular different customer segments are common, across the board, regardless of what industry you're in. But we're talking like an industrial facility, which I'm sure many of you probably have a background or maybe currently work in with your organization in these types of environments. Some unique challenges is, limiting downtime of how to be able to fit in training without, taking people off the line if it's a manufacturing facility, for example. Also, there may be certain aspects of these facilities where fire is a higher risk. If they're doing hot work with welding and things like that, or molten metals, how do you go ahead? How do you want to train that group of folks versus your office workers? And a lot of times there's a whole mixed bag in these types of cases. So having the ability to, again, train your way of where you want to set these systems up, whether you're doing live fire training outside or if you're doing the digital type of training or a technology similar to that, where you can have that flexibility to train in your work environment. This is something that you'll see a common thread as we go through several different of these use cases. But really, some of these key points are, reducing the downtime, being able to do this when and where you need to. And a lot of these types of environments, you have sometimes a high turnover. You have new people coming in all the time. So how are you doing training, and how frequently are you able to do that with your current curriculum? If you want to have people to be able to take it a little bit beyond classroom, it presents a whole separate set of challenges. And that's generally where we find folks coming to us and starting that conversation of, I want to do this. How's the best way to do this? Because once you start adding up the numbers for that, it can become quite costly through thinking of traditional channels or having outside contractors come in. But really, that flexibility and the ability to train anywhere, anytime is one of the main things that we see from customers in this specific segment, I would say.
Dave, I want to address a question in this that just came up. The question was, does Lion provide on-site training, or is your system to purchase and keep in-house only? Go ahead and address that and how kind of we approach the industry with this.
Sure. So we don't actually provide any of the training. We provide the tools for you to be able to train your way, as we've said multiple times, particular to Lion. However, I would say at this point, with these types of products have been on the market for 15 plus years, it's very commonly used. If you've ever explored doing something hands-on training outside of the traditional way for fire extinguisher training, you're likely potentially even bringing in a service that's using one of our systems. So there's a number of different ways that you could go about having effective training, whether it makes sense or not to make the investment yourself if you're looking to actually get equipment to own and have and possess in-house. Matt also touched on before, many of our clients will have multiple locations where things are shared amongst on a corporate level and shift around to reduce costs for that. And then several many folks will have folks come in, whether many fire departments use this. It's a leading way for them to conduct the training as well too. So if you have the fire department to come in, many of you may have experience using these systems as well through your local fire department or a training company. So they're out there in many ways, shape, or forms. How that works best for you and your particular organization, that's up to you. But Lion, we provide the tools. We don't actually go out and do the training for you.
Good. Another quick question, or that came up, and this is important to answer. Several people have asked who they could rent equipment from or who might provide training. One good partner that we have, and there are others in the industry, is Cintas. They're out there. They're definitely a great group to work with. So that's a resource, but reach out to us individually, please, and we'll help you understand who in your area might be another person to work with. I mean, it's a large national level group, but we'd love to help you with that. Kind of moving into another group, and I think this is one of the other high use cases for some of the digital technology, especially the bullseye and the ray station, the healthcare industry. And interesting little factoid here, it was something like 35% of fires that happen in a hospital setting happen on the operating table where people actually spontaneously combust. Well, it's not spontaneous combustion. They're using high levels of oxygen that can catch spark or solder. So it's a big industry. There's a lot of risks involved, and they've been looking for a way to train better. I think this presents some good tools. But Dave, what else are you seeing in this industry?
This industry in particular, if we're talking about, the hospital setting, for example, this is very, very heavily weighted towards the digital technology, for obvious reasons of bringing people outside of the facility to go out and do hands-on training isn't exactly feasible. You're running a facility 24/7 with different shifts. If you're potentially trying to use an outside resource to come in and do training, how are you doing that through your overnight shift and so on? Or if you want to be able to train in a scenario in an empty patient's room or in an operating room or at a nurse's station, there's a number of different use cases. And this is actually an area where I've probably heard the most creative uses of the digital technology, where it's not always for fire extinguisher training. They'll set up a bullseye panel to block one of the means of exit to simulate a fire blocking a stairwell. What's another way to get out? Or they're potentially adding some smoke to that scenario as well too. That's completely up to the customer. People have mixed feelings about smoke or no smoke, but also this is one of the driving forces that led us to develop our race station. It's where you can take it beyond the fire extinguisher training to go through the whole emergency response procedure of pulling the fire alarm, dialing 911, or whatever your internal number may be for that, to go through the proper procedure for that. Feedback from customers in this particular segment were a major driving force to have us as a fire safety company go beyond just the fire extinguisher training as well, to try to capture a better way for our customers and clients to be able to go ahead and work through the entire emergency response procedure. And it gives you a lot of different flexibility to create things, whatever the scenario may be based on your needs.
That's a great point, Dave, right there. We actually just had a question about a person who purchased the Bull-X ITS before Lion purchased Bull-X. And now that Lion is Bull-X, they're looking for a solution they can do indoors, day or night. I mean, that is something that people are looking for. And it just comes back to the right tool for the right job. The tools are out there. I encourage you to give us a call afterwards and we can discuss what might be the right thing for you. And those tools are ever expanding, as I kind of teased about, VR and other things we have that are coming to the marketplace. So I'm so glad that everyone has kind of attended. We have, a couple of minutes left, and I want to make sure that we leave a little bit of time for questions. The other two groups that we had kind of mentioned here, and we'll kind of muscle through them real quick, is community engagement and then schools and universities. And there has been some chatter in the chat today about even like the fire service schools that are out there. So it's not just fire service training centers. It's also elementary schools. It's also high schools. It's also, trade schools that are teaching people to become firefighters, or people that are, there are trade schools that are teaching people to become occupational health and safety professionals. Fire safety is becoming mainstream in our educational system. And the tools are out there. If that's you and that's what you're involved with, these are perfect educational tools. We have many different testimonials from people that this was what made their program have that level of excitingness, hands-on, something they could do with the students that made it engaging and purposeful. So I'm glad that that came up. And really the other thing is it's about word of mouth. I think that it's not just about line, it's about technology. It's something that needs to be furthered in this industry. So without going too much further into our diatribes here, I want to just make sure we have some time to open this up to questions. I think it's a perfect point, you guys, to kind of finish the presentation and open it up to questions.
Well, thank you so much for this fantastic presentation. Truly, this has been great. Uh, Before we start the Q&A, we want to remind everyone of the evaluation survey we're asking you to complete. The survey will open in a different screen after this webinar. Your input is important because it does help us improve our future webcast. And as a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, click the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and type your question and press send. Let's see if we...
So one thing here in the chat,
Yeah.
someone mentioned they're using this at the University of Arizona. I would love to get your experience a little bit further. I'd love to be able to reach out to you after this, and Jeff, we'll try and get with you there, because that is really a segment of the marketplace that we think is really well served. I just had a testimonial sent in to us from Bowling Green University, where a dorm room student who had been trained using the Bullseye setup, I don't believe they used the race station, but they did use the Bullseye, saved about 300 girls in the dorm room because she got after an incipient stage fire and she just barely got it out. And it was in the middle of the night in the dorm rooms. And I love hearing stuff like that. And I would love to connect with you after this.
Hey, Matt, there's been some great questions coming in. Do you mind if I tackle one that I see?
Yeah,
is that okay?
Grab it. Go, man.
Yeah.
Go.
You know, there's one from Steven. He was just saying that he has an extinguisher trainer. I'm assuming he has the digital, the Bullseye. But he was asking if there have been changes that have made to it. He was looking specifically if the screen was lighter for transport purposes. So, you know, just one thing I want to answer. Matt had mentioned this before. This has been on the market for about 15 years. And Stephen, to answer your question directly, yes, we have made changes to this system and we have reduced the weight of the original system. So it is much easier for transport purposes. It's much easier for one person to utilize. And if I could just kind of answer one real other question real quick, I don't want to take up all the time, but someone had asked if there's specific training on operating the equipment. And, you know, there's a lot of different ways that we can help with that and we can support with that. But really, just to answer that question, it is a very easy and intuitive system to utilize. Dave, would you agree with me on that?
Absolutely. If you could operate a TV remote, you can operate the system. There's no special training involved. That's what, something that everyone can relate to. And even our live fire system, it's very simple to use. You don't need to go through a certification course or anything like that in order to be able to be an effective trainer for, even if you don't have like a strong background, I would say in fire safety or fire service. It's an accessible system for you to be able to have that effective training and be able to offer that as a service to your employees.
Another good question was about resources for training on learning how to use that. We are working on that. That's one of our continuous process improvement things. Dave and I are working on some videos right now, but there are good resources on the website and there are user guides that come with it. There's a slew of videos that are on YouTube that other people have put together, but we are working on some dedicated resources to help you understand the setup and the process. When it comes to the training, actual fire extinguisher training, there are other resources that we could direct you towards. The Lion has stayed a little bit agnostic with regards to the training because there's so many different ways you can do it. And it really comes down to finding the one that is right, utilizing or working with a professional in your field for you. Nonetheless, that is something that we are continuously working on. So thank you for that question.
Someone else asked, speaking of changes, if future equipment updates become available, how does the Lion address upgrades?
Duke, I'll let you field this one.
Yeah, I'd love to answer that question. So we've designed this system in the with the mindset that we won't have to make software updates. However, should we have to do that, that is something that can be done easily in your location to be able to connect to that if it needed to happen. We'd be able to upload it a couple different ways. And one of the main specific ways, something we didn't really get into the weeds on the detail. I'm sorry if I said weeds, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but into the details of the system itself. There's a USB port on the back. Now, there is some information that can be transported back and forth or pushed through that USB drive. Some of that, the majority of that information is roster management. There is, again, I don't want to go into the specifics of the system, but you do have the ability to maintain rosters throughout the system. But the point of this is that there's multiple different avenues for us that if there needs to be a software update in the future, we will be able to support you with that. So that you can have that updated moving forward. So awesome question. Thanks, Alan, for making sure we answered that. Really appreciate it.
No problem at all. Any closing thoughts, gentlemen, as we wrap up here?
There's been so many good comments, and I think a lot
Yes.
of good connections already made here. I have really enjoyed this, and thank you. One final thing. I've seen 3 or 4 requests for both the presentation and for some sort of certificate of attendance. I'll work on that and see what we can get you. And I believe that we'll be able to reach out to you after this as a group and see what we can get to you all for that. Thank you for bringing that up.
Well, yes, unfortunately, we are out of time today. Thank you so much to our awesome presenters, Matthew Gardner, David Sardinsky, David Dukowitz, everyone with our sponsor Lion, of course, all of you who joined us today. Take care and have a safe day.
Thank you.
Thank you.